to our work session, which is related to the currently proposed residential development on the south end of Yellow Springs. And it's going to be a great opportunity to cover a lot of information, and I expect we're going to have a lot going on these next 2 hours. So with that, Judy, if we could call the roll to get the meeting started.
Yes, Housh.
I'm here.
Stokes. Looking.
I'll just mention now that Kevin Stokes has a family funeral today and probably will not be able to join us. So our condolences to him and his family.
Sorry to hear that. McQueen. Here. Brown. I'm not seeing Brown, and I just sent the link to Lisa Krieger. She's been delayed, and it's going to need to come in on her phone. So at present, we actually do not have a quorum.
I think actually Lisa's is probably that iPhone that's trying to join right now. So
let's, if we can just get one more person in so we can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, looks like the iPhone is still having a challenge.
Oh, here she comes.
Okay, so let's make Lisa a co-host. And Lisa, we were just calling the meeting to order. Judy, do you want to ask Lisa again? She's unmuted.
I'm here. Yeah, sure I am.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you now have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about today's work session because as I mentioned at the top, we have a lot to cover, and fortunately, we also have 3 more meetings scheduled where we will continue to review and discuss questions and comments. But as with our council meetings, we have the attendees muted. The chat is disabled. But for anyone that has questions that come up that they'd like to be answered either today or on Wednesday, or at the next council meetings, it would be best to chat those to Judy. So you can chat to a co-host of the meeting, but we won't have an open chat because this is a public meeting and we need to talk about everything in the open. Otherwise, if we do have time for citizen comments or questions at the end of the meeting, then we will ask you to unmute. But I do want to emphasize that given the amount of information that we want to cover, we will first address, I think, many of your questions through your council representatives. But again, if we have time at the end, we will certainly do that. There will be plenty of time, I should say, for citizen comment at the subsequent 3 meetings. I also wanted to mention, just in terms of what we'll be covering this morning and afternoon, we're going to start with an overview of the project, and that will be led by the Oberer development team. We have George Oberer, we've got Greg Smith, I see Michael's here. So we've got several folks from the Oberer team that will be able to provide a lot of information and also answer questions. We will then have Josue and the village team talk about the fit of the project and also provide additional background on how we got to where we are today and looking at this PUD, which is a planned unit development. As I mentioned, we'll spend the bulk of the time providing for questions and answers from council members. And then again, we will, if time, invite citizens to comment or question. But I think a lot of the questions I've been seeing so far are going to be answered today. And again, make sure any questions you have are chatted or emailed or phoned in to Judy, because we want to have a complete list so that we continue to address all issues and concerns. I wanted to also just highlight briefly what I think are the goals of today's work session. And first and foremost, it is to explain the project. And this is why we want to make sure that there's clarity around the PUD versus the alternative, which is the existing residential A zoning. I should also mention that, we are not talking about a decision between a project or no project. We are talking about a decision between a planned unit development and what that involves versus a project that would fall under the existing zoning. Most importantly, we are still at the gathering information stage, which is why in December, we understood that it would be good to have more time. And so a lot of the questions posed then have been answered and will be discussed today. And I think it's important that not only do we have a lot of these details, but that people also understand the background and the context. And this is, of course, very important to council members who want to make the best decision for our community. I think the other thing is a goal is to clarify. There's been a lot of mischaracterization and misinformation, and that's easy to happen with these kinds of issues. So we want to do our best to properly characterize a variety of things and certainly make sure that everyone has actual real information about things like, infrastructure, costs, et cetera. Final thing I want to do is I just had a few observations that I think maybe I will call things to listen for or look for. And in particular, I think it's important to highlight, part of how we got here is we did a really wonderful housing needs assessment a couple of years ago. And regardless of where I've heard people, be on the spectrum of thoughts around this proposed development, the one thing I've heard everyone reference is that Bowen housing assessment. And it was important to hear Kevin Magruder, who was part of our housing advisory board, highlight that report said we need housing of all types. And I think that that's an important context piece because we're looking at, goals and objectives that came out of that study. They've been referenced a lot. But I think you'll learn more about some of the opportunities we have of some of the proposed different types of housing, which can also allow for shifting in who's living in which homes in our community. And it can promote a lot of other things to support families and other folks who want to live in town. Second thing I wanted to talk about is that this is a site that has been thought about for residential development for decades upon decades. And there's a lot of history and background there. But when you look at things like the fact that there's a sewer pipe that or sewer line that crosses the property and other sorts of things, this is not new thinking, and it is definitely something that has been thought about in terms of trying to balance all the different concerns of the village. And you'll certainly hear more about that as we talk about the project. I wanted to mention that I think a lot of the issues that we've heard that are maybe less about some of the concrete actionable items remind me of something that Kevin has articulated around our personal preferences and interests versus what's good for our community and village as a whole. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, because while Kevin's not here today, he would have highlighted that he has recused himself due to his home being in the proximity of the proposed development. But at the same time, he realizes that his personal interests, which may not be fully supportive or interested in that, are outweighed by the fact that for the village as a whole, we're going to see lots of things that address issues and concerns, and we'll be talking about that. I think in particular, we have to remember that stakeholders include our schools and supporting those schools, both monetarily and in terms of students, residents who, with a rather small community, have a burden that could be shared by more, allowing us to have excellent services and utilities and maintain that excellence in service. I think diversity is really important. And, we see that with other developments like Birch 3 that have come to the village, that we get a wide diversity of folks that really contribute to our creative community. And our businesses as well. We have a thriving downtown, and we have a lot of businesses, a grocery store, a lot of shops, a hardware store, and we want to make sure that we continue to be that thriving, vibrant community. I also wanted to talk about the PUD, and I think it's going to be really important to think about the things that we are getting are being contributed or offered by Oberer, and distinguish that from the fact that they are not asking for a density bonus in this case. In fact, when you look at the two developments, we're talking about potentially 3 less units, but we're still seeing contributions being offered to our community around affordable housing, which is incredibly important, and we do not have enough property for affordable housing. The more that we can get and support that, the better, to mitigate the gentrification that we see in our village and around the world. We also think about things like the open space, the constructed wetland that's going to address environmental water issues, trails, park. There's a variety of things that will definitely flesh out in the plan that I think are really important. And again, we'll talk about the fairness of the proposed deal that we're looking at. I think it'll be very important to look at safety, because while there are several emotional trigger kinds of things that are being brought up, that I think we'll be able to correct those concerns with accurate information. There are things like safety, which are legitimate concerns. And so it's very important to talk about what that looks like. And also keep in mind that we do have other somewhat smaller residential areas in the village, like the Fair Acres neighborhood that has 2 entrances, and also Omar Circle. And thinking about some of the practical traffic patterns that we actually see in the village. And the last thing I want to say is I really feel that the village team has done a great job and has done their job properly. And this kind of gets back to mischaracterization. When we look at things like a PUD being brought forward, and we'll talk more about this, this came out of discussions that initially involved a citizen and council committee. And we talked a lot about the things that our community members wanted, such as affordable housing, such as thinking about environmental concerns, such as diverse housing types and so forth. And so out of that discussion initially with Oberer, and several, I think, people on this call were in those meetings, we came to realize that the way that you accomplish that is through a planned unit development. All right, this was something that council and really everyone was involved in from the beginning. And once we realized that these would be good things to figure out, that then led to the planned unit development. This is one of the things that I was surprised that it was framed on social media as a negative, because this is really why you have a village government and you have this extensive kind of work so that you can get the best possible outcome that fits that situation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Oberer team and let them focus on the project. Oh, and by the way, I again want to mention for people that have come in late, if you have questions, you can chat those directly to Judy. Chat is not open in this meeting. You can always email them to her as well. And we will do our best to allow for citizen comments and questions at the end. But many of those may need to be shifted to the town hall meeting, which is why we're having that. So Greg and George, take it away, and thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. I'm going to share a presentation that some of you have already seen. I've modified it to try to answer a number of the questions that have come across the past few months. Mostly the modifications you're going to see will be in red. So let me try to share the screen here and get started. All right, can everybody see the screen on with the title of the development on the right? No? All right, hold on a minute. How about now? Sorry about that. You think after 2 years of coronavirus, I'd be better at Zoom. All right, so this presentation we're sharing with you this morning was originally shared with council at the October 6, 2021 workshop session. Eventually was shared with the Plan Commission in November and is being revised for this morning. Just a little bit of history on the Oberer companies. You know, we've actually just recently celebrated our 75th anniversary, so that's a little dated on the slide. Led by George Oberer Jr. here, he's with us today. The company was originally started by his father and grandfather 75 years ago. And George has been with us not quite the entire 75 years there. And I've been about 20 years now, so. The site, everybody's pretty much aware of, but just to clarify, it's several parcels that originally were in both the township and the village of Yellow Springs, kind of outlined in the red little outline area there on the bottom of the screen. As Brian alluded to, the Yellow Springs comprehensive plan identified this area for residential development. It was called out with different things. Some of the notes in that plan noted that Yellow Springs had a strong demand for housing, that they had a strong demand for many different types of housing. I want to point out that our proposed plan will include over 30 different floor plans with over 100 plus elevations, including 2 types of duplex units, a townhome product, and of course the affordable housing projects that's being donated to the village. So, you know, we are not by any means offering a cookie cutter type development with 100 different elevations. It's very likely that there'll be a large variety of different types of homes and styles in this neighborhood. And yeah, the area is identified as HDR for a mixture of single family, townhome, and cottage style homes by the comprehensive plan that was completed in 2020. One of the things that Oberer does very early on when we look at a piece of property is do an existing analysis of kind of the environmental conditions and the physical infrastructure conditions of any piece of property. We do that early on before we decide something we'd like to develop. This property has several conditions which everybody should be brought up to speed on. As Brian alluded to, the dotted line shown here is the existing sanitary sewer main which runs through the property. That has been there, the best we can tell, since the 60s. So that main has been there for a long time. Always intended to serve the neighborhood to the north, and there are several lots within the original village parcel that have been platted out at one time. So those lots originally had been slated for development of single family. Not really sure why that never happened back in then, but you know, it's almost 60 years ago. I highlighted a couple of areas here just to point out some things that we consider. There is water along Spillane and at the end of Southgate, so the site is well served by sewer and water. There is a shallow rock area here to the west of the site, and you'll see how Oberer is proposing and dealing with that particular area in a way that is sensitive to that shallow rock. There is an area of poor soils just here to the center of the site, and again we have a creative solution to that area. And then there's an area with some topography challenges here to the northeast, where a steep hill works way up to existing residential. And certainly not least, there is a creek that runs along the western border of the property, which is considered the waters of the U.S. I got a little timeline here. I certainly don't want to read this verbatim, but just to give everybody an idea, you know, we've been working on this for the village for just under 2 years now. We signed a purchase contract to acquire the property in March of 2020. Of course, everybody remembers that date. It's when we started working at home. So things started moving a little slow on this development, largely nothing to do with the village or Oberer, just the reality of the world at the time. We did meet with both township and village staff originally in July. Those are our first meetings with township and village staff. Village staff early on asked us to consider a development with more diversity as far as product types. Our original proposal had all single family housing. And the village staff and council members that we interacted with early on expressed a desire to have a larger variety of housing available in the development. So we spent a lot of time modifying, critiquing, updating the plan to enable that to become so. But the reality is that requires a PUD. Straight zoning would not allow the things like duplexes, the townhomes, and even the little affordable housing area that the PUD would allow. So that's kind of how we ended up into a planned unit development as opposed to straight zoning for the property we started out with. Eventually, we did agree to annex the property into the village. We thought that was the best thing for both us and the village, in that we wanted to be part of the community and wanted the entire proposed development to be part of the community. We participated in a workshop in October, had some plan commission hearings in November, and our initial reading in December. So as Brian alluded to, going forward, we'll have council meetings again in February. If things go well, we will submit our final development plans and construction drawings in the spring and could start construction this summer. New homes will not be available until sometime next year, being it's about a 9-month build span right now as materials are coming in. And we anticipate that the entire development will take 5 to 6 years to build. One thing Brian alluded to that we did not present the first time, nor I don't think we've ever shared with the public in general, is what a development will look like under the existing RA zoning. This is not really what we want to build. This is what we would build if we're not granted a PUD. We've worked with the village. The current zoning requires a minimum of 60-foot wide lots. There's no open space requirement other than a park dedication, which we'd work with the village on under the existing zoning. Choice one laid out this plan for us per our request. It shows 143 single-family lots, each of them 60-foot wide, so it meets the current zoning. Our PUD plan as proposed will show 140 lots. So we've never actually asked for a density bonus. Our application is pretty clear on that initially, and this plan is confirmation of that. That density bonus is not what we were seeking. The contributions we are granting under the PUD are being given to create a better community is all, not as to create a different profit for what we would do. The proposed development that we are sharing, what we've come up with after working with a year with staff and some of the council members and folks coming in and providing input, is attached. You can see the sewer line comes along here, and that kind of sets in stone a couple of the streets. Obviously, Southgate would need to extend south, and the entrance to Spillane pretty much needs to come. We've got it bumped up a little bit to the north just to kind of give it a little bit of a curve, slow traffic down a little bit, but it has to follow that sewer line coordination. The single family homes we are proposing are shown in the light tan here, coming through here. Remember I mentioned that this area here had some poor soils. These homes here will all be built on basements. The area here is the area which had the high rock. These are all duplexes built on slabs as not to interfere with that rock. The sanitary sewer that will be extended through this area also will be very shallow, as they don't have to serve basements, and again will not interfere with the high rock. As Brian alluded to, we've proposed a creative stormwater solution for this area and for the entire development, in that we see this as a rain garden constructed wetland area here to the far west. That has some huge benefits. A, we're not getting into the rock again, but B, we'll put in wetland planting materials through here, which will help filter out any pollutants in the stormwater before it gets to the creek. In addition, we think it's going to be an attractive area. Our goal is to, Shasta daisies, sunflowers, things that would work well with wetter areas. And we'll hire a landscape architect to assist us with that design. And Brian has pointed out that there are also folks in the neighborhood, in the community, who could assist with that planting, appropriate planting materials in that wetland. The area with the topography challenges, we're showing townhomes. And the idea of these townhomes will be that the main living area will be on the second floor, which will then have exits, pretty much at grade level at the rear yard. And then the garage will be on the first floor at grade level again in the front. I think I've already covered most of what's on this slide. It just kind of shows the existing infrastructure and the planned infrastructure in the community. You can see the storm lines coming here in red going to all the stormwater retention components. It's important to note out that under state law, we are not allowed to release more water into the creek than what has previously been released. So we must retain that water, hence the purpose of the stormwater retention areas. And in fact, we are working with the village to retain and treat water that was not currently retained and treated, including some water coming off of the existing neighborhood here, which is going to be treated by the Oberer ponds at no cost to the village. Early on, the council and staff members we met with expressed the importance of pedestrian access and transportation. So I want to point out that we have proposed sidewalks on both sides of the street internal to our development and on our side of the street of Spillane. In addition, through working with the village staff, we're going to include a bunch of these little neighborhood cut-throughs. The two pictures on the right are other Ober developments. We've done this in the past, so this is not too unique to us. As you can see, we're proposing a multi-purpose type path from one of the cul-de-sacs here out to Spillane, where it'll connect to the sidewalks. Pathways which will allow our residents and anybody else in the community who wants to visit the wetlands. And then we're going to work to try to get a path out to the existing path along 68, which goes all the way to downtown, which is only about a mile away. So we see this as being a very walkable neighborhood in that, downtown Yellow Springs is a mile. It's not, an easy walk, but not too bad, with the entire 68 pedestrian trail going the entire distance. The Glen is only about a half mile to the east, and Antioch is probably between a half and 3/4 of a mile, depending on where you're headed. Oh, also within nice proximity, we have Calypso Grill, the Yellow Springs Brewery and Barrel Room, and then there's a Dollar General also real close by. All our PUDs include open space preservation. It's something that Oberer does early on. We look at our sites, try to preserve the sensitive areas of a site. We designated the most sensitive areas in this site as those around the creek, being that creek should be a protected resource. As part of that, we're proposing dedicating a public park in the northwest corner of the site. We're proposing preserving the tree line along the western edge of the site and keeping a pretty good buffer between the single family development there and that creek. You got to keep in mind, even the areas that are shown as tan, the houses will only sit on a small portion of those. That's the lot lines there, not the building outlines. So we'll have probably at least a 40 to 50 foot setback everywhere from the creek, if not more. Landscaping, this is kind of a preliminary landscaping plan. We will use landscaping as native to Ohio in all our plantings. Every street will include street trees along both sides of the street. We've increased the width of the tree lawns from the curb to the sidewalks to make sure that the trees have plenty of room to grow in that tree lawn. In addition, we'll have plantings in the wetlands. You kind of got a little breakdown section there. And of course, we'll landscape the park and our entryway. As part of the park, we plan on making a donation of equipment to the village. It's not uncommon for us to build a park for our neighborhoods, but mostly they're HOA owned and controlled. In this instance, working with the village, this park will be owned and controlled by the village, built and paid for 100% by Oberer. We estimate the value of the land that's being donated to be about $102,000 and include $32,000 worth of equipment. And we'll work with the village staff on exactly what that equipment looks like. The picture shown here is equipment I've used in a recent park, but it doesn't have to be exactly this style or shape. I'm happy to work with the village staff as long as the budget's similar on how that playground comes to be. A lot of the concerns we've heard revolve around traffic, and that's not unique to this development. Pretty much here, that concern for every development I've built in the past 20 years. By definition, one more house is one more car, and one more car is more traffic. And so I understand these concerns. We do hire Choice One to prepare a traffic impact study. This study found that all the intersections around our development are currently very well served. They're all scored as A intersections. And it mostly includes the intersection there on Spillane and Hyde, and then the routes to the north off Southgate. What the study found was that they will continue to be A intersections after the development is built. The most added delay to those intersections was at one off Southgate, which would add 3 to 7 seconds at full build out to the current time lane, making 9-second wait the worst case scenario during rush hours. Per the comments we heard at some of the December meetings, we expanded the traffic study to include the Hyde Road and State Route 68 intersection. That is beyond what is typically required, but we needed to do that to be able to truly answer the questions that are being presented to us. And we found that that intersection also currently scores an A. and that the added traffic would only increase the delay to that intersection to 1 or 2 seconds. Choice one asked us to emphasize to staff and council that their study was prepared per ODOT and industry standards and requirements. And we do have a representative from Choice One on the phone today and happy to answer any questions. But, you know, a lot of the feelings with traffic are things which folks consider things like traffic speed of existing neighbors and stuff to that community. And please understand, I can't control how fast the existing people in Yellow Springs currently drive, nor can I control exactly how fast my neighbors would eventually drive. But we have done a number of things to the neighborhood to slow down traffic through our community, and think we've done a good job on that. And I also asked them to, you know, look at pedestrian a little bit, because again, walkable neighborhood is something that was important to us. And I think this site helps a lot to make a walkable neighborhood to be built. Within 1 mile of this site, there are 1,500 jobs within the village, which I think is incredible for most new communities. So that allows folks who live in the new development to work and do the other things within the village and truly become village residents. Some of the questions and suggestions have been asked, include making a connection straight to 68. And I'd like to address that just largely because, one, we do not own the property between our development, and this is off just a little bit scale-wise, but between our development and 68, that property is owned by a different property owner. It is not currently part of the village. Most notably, we believe a connection straight to 68 from the development will actually increase traffic, not decrease traffic, because it'll create a cut through, which is not currently existing. It is our desire to have a very pedestrian-oriented, quiet neighborhood without traffic cutting through 68, heading up to the neighborhoods here, or heading to neighborhoods here, cutting through 68. As we've laid it out, there's not much of a reason for these new neighbors coming through the new development to go up into the neighborhood to the northeast. If they were looking to head north, the shortest and best route would be coming up Southgate and out this direction. And this is off just a little bit. Southgate's actually one more to the left. Sorry about the bad slide. And then out Hyde Road if they're going to the south. I did mention we have implemented design elements to slow down traffic. And here's kind of showing how we're doing that. As you can see here, the top profile is the existing profile of Southgate. We're proposing Southgate be extended at its existing width and existing design. I am including 5-foot tree lawns on both sides, a little bit bigger than the 4-foot required, to try to give some space for trees along there. Complete streets do tend to slow down traffic. We also can show the 4-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street, which offer pedestrian changes. And we will have parking on both sides of the street. Parking on both sides of the street also slows down traffic. People tend to slow down when cars are parked on the street, including in the neighborhoods that I live in, which are overbuilt community. On the cul-de-sacs, we are proposing narrowing the street by additional 4 feet. That additional footage is being put in the tree lawns. It's not being added to an Oberer lawn or anyway making our density more. The idea is just to give even more space for those trees to grow. And additionally, the narrower streets in the cul-de-sacs will really slow down traffic within those cul-de-sacs. And I should mention, I live on a cul-de-sac of the exact same width with parking on both sides of the street. A lot of the concerns circle around Spillane. And we pointed out before, it is our intention to widen the west side of Spillane. We do not anticipate a lot of our traffic using Spillane to the north. Most of the traffic going south will use Spillane to the south and come down on Hyde. Traffic going north will mostly go out Southgate. So going north in Spillane is not a common movement out of the development. The only reason folks would do that if they were to go visit somebody in the neighborhoods to the northeast. but we do plan on widening the street to meet subdivision requirements on our side of the street, including the tree lawn and a sidewalk along our side of Spillane. By the way, I should note that the traffic study showed that no improvements were required to Spillane. I think I've already touched on this. This slide just kind of goes in some of the variety of housing that we are proposing. One note here is the acreage located here in the northeast corner is being donated to the village. This donation will put this area 100% in control, the village in control of the resulting development in that area. Once the donation is made, Oberer will not have any control over that affordable housing, how it looks, how it's built. That'll be up to the village to decide. Even the density on that will be up to the village to decide. We're happy to share information. We are going to provide utilities to the front free of cost, and deal with the stormwater in our ponds created by the affordable housing, but are not making any profit off of that directly. And this is some of the stuff I've just said. It's a 1.7 acre piece of property. We estimate that value to be about $150,000. It is a free will donation and contribution on our part. We are not expecting or receiving a density bonus or other zoning compensation for that contribution. And we'll provide street access and all utilities, and the council will decide how it's developed. As for the other products, here's some conceptuals for you. The duplexes, as mentioned, will be a slab product. We will have both a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom duplex. They'll look pretty much similar. The 2-bedroom will likely contain a 1-car garage versus a 2-car garage as shown on this elevation. And if anybody has any curiosity, we are currently building this duplex just north of Costco and Cornerstone. I believe our model is probably 85% done at this point in time. Not quite open for the public yet, but will be shortly. The townhomes shown on the left, this is more of a conceptual model. We haven't built townhomes for 10 to 12 years and are going to update our product to meet the needs here. But we foresee this being a different price point even yet than the duplexes. As you can see, we'll have the garages on the first floor, main living will be on the second, with bedrooms on the third. And as mentioned earlier, there'll be, this doesn't show the hill in the background, but there'll be a hill in the background with a patio or most likely a small deck that exits out the building to the rear. And as I mentioned earlier, Oberer is a semi-custom home builder. The way that we define that is we're different than a production builder. We, years ago, we were a production builder back in the 80s and 90s. But as we've come out of the recession of 10, 12 years ago, we've changed our home plans and our offerings to the communities to be more of a semi-custom. And the idea of that is we will have standard in-stock home plans and elevations, but are willing to make numerous changes, especially interior changes to those offerings per the request of customers. And that kind of creates a unique component for us. If you bring us a stove you like to see, or a countertop, or a picture of an idea that you've seen somewhere, somebody else has, or saw in a catalog, we work with our customers to provide that level of service, not often found in most production builders. We're different from a custom builder in that a custom builder will often start from a scratch sheet of paper, and most custom homes are $1 million plus these days. And we'll tend to offer our single family homes in the $350,000 to $500,000 range. By the way, I'll mention the duplexes will start in the mid 2s, go all the way up to the 3s. And we don't have a price quite yet for the townhomes, but are hoping to get those just about the same as the duplexes, but serving a little different population because they're a little different design. And here's some more of the elevations we share. You see, we're both single family and single story and 2-story homes. The patio homes are a little smaller. Some of the single family, large 1-story patio homes or ranches as well. And we have a wide variety of colors and elevations to go along with it. Over 100 are currently being offered. One of the concerns brought up by a planning commission was light pollution. It is our intention to not to include any streetlights in the neighborhood and to provide lighting solely through that is included in the house. We will have each lot will include a small post light, which will be used to light the entry and the sidewalk in front of the home. We will have lights underneath the front porch area and then on the garage. One of the conditions that Plan Commission recommended as part of the PUD was that all that lighting be night sky sensitive, and we will accept that condition as part of a PUD approval. It should be noted that that is not part of this village's current zoning ordinance, so that is, again, a concession being made as part of the PUD. And here's some pictures of some of the existing homes and some of our other developments I could share with you. And I'll kind of come back to the PUD here, and I'll quit talking here in a few seconds. I just want to mention that, you know, Oberer started this development, started this acquisition process with the idea of building all single-family houses on this site. And that was the way we presented it originally to the township and to the village staff. And it's through the efforts of staff, some of the council members, and our input we've received over the past year that resulted in us proposing a site which includes single-family housing as originally was proposed, but also includes two different types of duplexes, the townhomes and the affordable housing. And as you can see, includes more open space than what would currently be required under the current zoning. One of the questions that I got asked early on is who will live in our subdivision? And fair housing kind of limits us to a lot on what I can say about that. But what I can do say is that when we start a community, we do a market study. And that market study typically includes areas within great proximity to a development. So most of the area we consider our market is within a few miles of this particular site. Secondary, I noticed most of our customers over the years tend to have some sort of connection to the place they're choosing to live. So most of our customers, certainly not all, may be residents currently of the Yellow Springs, maybe people who have kids in school in Yellow Springs but don't currently live in Yellow Springs, maybe people who work in Yellow Springs but don't currently live in Yellow Springs, or maybe people who live somewhere nearby and have some sort of family or other connection to the village. Most folks do not choose to live in a development just because they like the developer. They tend to choose a development in a community they want to live in, and they choose to pick the communities they want to live in based on their personal connections. So often I hear people refer to the residents who choose to live in this neighborhood as those people. And I would like to discourage that kind of discussion, being that you'll find after a couple of years that these residents will actually be residents of the village of Yellow Springs. And we hope they are currently and continue to be, and will contribute to the village and become part of your community. And with that, I'll turn it over back to I believe the next on the agenda is for the council to be able to answer questions. So I'll go ahead and leave it to that. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate that overview. And I think you've already highlighted a lot of issues around questions that the community has. Before we shift to council questions, I am going to have Josue and his team highlight any other pieces around Village Fit and anything they want to add that they think would be good for background for our citizens.
Thank you, Brian. Some of my comments on this, Brian, are gonna build on what you stated in your introduction. I think you did a good job at outlining what informs the government when it comes to project. So you'll hear some references to what you said and what Greg has said. Greg, thank you for your presentation. I think it's very informative, and obviously we have been working at this for 18 months. So I want to start back on what are the guiding documents that we use to orient our work and to guide our work. When Greg reached out to us on their initial plans, we have an open door policy. So anyone who's looking to do business in the village, looking to do work in the village, we go through a process. We outline what are our procedures, what are our zoning requirements, what are the documents and regulations that guide our work. So we conducted an orientation with Greg and George and his team and their teams on the project, and provided an overview of the zoning code. We also provided an overview on what the village has tasked the administration, the particular village council has tasked the administration to accomplish. And I know that when I joined the team in 2019, affordable housing and increasing the housing supply was a top priority for a variety of reasons. One, the pressure, the economic pressure on house prices, the availability of homes. So those were issues. There's also a tax burden issue. There is a financial strain on our utilities. Utility costs have been rising. Maintenance and operating costs has been rising. So we had all those challenges that we as an administration need to address. Many of them which we have addressed now without any additional development. We increased efficiencies in all of our utilities, so they're performing better, and we've been able to avoid any rate increase for utilities. So we've been chipping away at all the top priorities of the administration. The housing supply, that's a difficult one to address, because it isn't very often that developers come to us with big projects. We've seen individual homes being developed over the last few years, but we haven't had anything of large scale. And this is by far the largest scale that many of us residents have seen in 30, 50 years. So I get that it's can be very alarming, but it also provides an opportunity. And we looked at what are the opportunities available in this development. As the village manager, I make sure to orient myself on the work of past administrations and past councils. And prior to Greg and George and team coming to provide the presentation, I was clear about what our 2010 vision plan was, what our comprehensive land use plan that we did most recently. So in all those plans, and I've even read a report from the 1970s for the League of Women Voters. All those plans considered additional development, particularly at this site, as Greg pointed out in his presentation, that the area, most of this area was already slated for development, high density development. So when we looked at our 2010 vision plan, this 2010 vision plan was done in conjunction with Miami Township and the village of Clifton. So it wasn't just Yellow Springs. It contemplated additional housing development that we needed to meet the housing demand. And particularly looked at encouraging the development closest to the village within the service boundary area. And as George and Greg pointed out in their presentations, the sewer line runs right through the middle of this property. We had the lawsuit with the Strewings, and that cemented the availability and the requirement of utilities at this property. So from our planning documents going back as far as 2010, the court settlement or the conclusion from the courts on the Strewing property, all of these plans point to additional development at this property. So to us, it's clear that development can happen at this site. Particular type of development can happen at the site. And we wanted to create value as much as we could for our community. Something that could speak to the affordability values, the availability of the variety of units, that the townhomes, the duplexes. Greg just pointed out that those duplexes could come in at mid 200s and as high as mid 300s. That's a product that I don't know how we bring a housing unit in the community at market rate without a PUD and without the work that we've done, because we just don't have the economies of scales, and we don't have that type of development happening in the village. So I think it provided an opportunity to bring about a greater variety of products that could serve different groups of people. And, I think we have different ideas of what the groups of people are, but we know that having these three different mixed products will be attracted to a greater variety of people versus just having the single family development. So the guiding documents that we use for our work, the visioning documents, the comprehensive land use plan, all speak to more development in this type of development. On the critical infrastructure pieces, we certified that we have the utilities, the available capacity in our utilities at this site, from sewer capacity, water, and electric. In fact, we received the communication from EPA today. We've sent them a request for them to provide some data validation on the availability of our sanitary, because I think that's been the one that's been the most restrictive, and the one that we've done a lot of work on. And the EPA has signed off that we have the capacity to take on this development. So from a utility infrastructure, we have the capacity to serve either the single family development as proposed or the PUD as proposed. So from a fit perspective, we are able to check off all the boxes that we need to check off for council to consider really either development. But obviously, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we did not work with Oberer to propose a PUD that creates greater value for our community. And Denise and Johnny are on board. Denise, is there anything that you want to add to the fitness perspective?
You summed it up really well. We don't do anything without going back and looking at our planning documents to make sure it's a good fit. Yes, they could have done straight RA zoning. When you annex in, it comes in as RA, which is the lowest density. But staff felt that the best product in the end, what the community valued, if you go back and you look at those planning documents, was the mixed types of housing, which would provide mixed levels of income, the open space, the affordable housing, it's the parks. There isn't any park in that area. This would serve not only this new neighborhood, but the existing neighborhoods as well. I mean, in the end, it's just a much better fit for the village than what we would get from straight RA.
Thank you, Denise. And I want to highlight that piece about the stormwater piece. Greg mentioned this a little bit in his presentation about that the PUD will address stormwater runoff that the village should be addressing. We have, and I don't know if Johnny wants to get into it, but in this PUD proposal, George and Greg have taken on the responsibility of managing stormwater runoff that the village is responsible for at the current site now. And the development that will go on the affordable housing. So they're upsizing their systems to do that. So that's, in addition to the affordable housing piece, there are infrastructure challenges that the PUD is also addressing on behalf of the village. Johnny, is there anything you wanna touch on that?
The stormwater issue was an issue that was prior to me even coming to the village, but the answer is to dig a hole onto the stream property and put orange construction fence around there and let the storm drains just drain out onto the property. So Ober has taken it upon themselves to reroute that to the retention and detention ponds so the village is in compliance. As far as everything else, I think they summed it up very well. Ober did, you and Denise. I was happy to get the email this morning from the EPA. They're not the timeliest people, but they sure got us the information that we didn't even give them a deadline on, and I got it at 8:30 this morning, saying that we had the capacity to be able to handle it with the improvements that we had done over the last 3 years. We have taken off enough of our letter that we got to be able to do this development. So I think it goes to say that the village team, we take our job very serious, and we did that with the whole intent of this project as well.
And to put that letter that Johnny referenced, in 2019, we received a letter from the Ohio EPA warning us that we were exceeding our daily flows and any development needed to be reconsidered and looked at through the existing capacity. So, and that letter was actually waiting for me on my table on my first day on the job. So that's what I walked into. And at that time, we were at 650,000 gallons per day. We've been able to reduce our sanitary flows down to 420,000 gallons per day. That's an improvement in our system of 35% in just 2 years. We started working on 2019, made major improvements in 2020. So that is a significant improvement on our part. And I want to congratulate Johnny and the team because they're in those maintenance holes getting the job done.
That's right. One other thing, that does not even count what we've done in 21 because of the averages. We just got done with sewer lining and relining some more manholes. So we're heading in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Denise, Johnny, Josue, and the rest of the team, thank you for adding that piece into the sort of background. And, I think I'll again reiterate, I have appreciated that a lot of different voices have been heard, and within the parameters of what we're looking at in this residential development, that we've maximized a lot of things that we value as a community. So we are going to shift into Q&A for beginning with council members. And, again, keeping in mind that while I, called them earlier council questions, I believe that we are asking the questions that we're hearing from our constituents, and that's really going to be our focus. I'll again reiterate for anyone that came into the meeting late, if we do have time at the end, we'll take some citizen comments and questions, but I do want to prioritize making sure that we cover a lot of these bigger issues that are going to really be important to our decision making. And I would suggest Marianne and Lisa, if you want to just be mic'd on, because one of us may ask a question and then another has a follow-up question. So I think it can be that diffuse in that way. So Marianne, Lisa, if whoever wants to get started.
I could start. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and Lisa's saying, you should be able to mic on now, Lisa. Yep.
Thanks.
Cool. Yep. All right.
Okay. My concerns center around environmental issues. In particular, acknowledging that climate change and loss of biodiversity is only increasing, and that we will be having to address both of these issues more, and they are becoming more critical. And as we move along, we will be having to address them more seriously. So my questions concern how that might happen within this development. So I have one specific question and then one more general question. The specific question is regards to the HOA. Actually, they may all fall under the HOA. it's my sense that, and hope, that this year the village will begin looking at how to liberalize our zoning code by allowing either smaller lots or maybe no lot minimum. Also, liberalizing our code in terms of what an accessory dwelling unit might look like, whether a house could have more than one accessory dwelling. Some issues around the lot size and the dwelling units. And then the other issues regarding the environment, which already are in place in terms of the village, but are a concern for me in this development, are renaturalizing the properties and what we would call managed natural landscape. So what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about just letting your weeds grow. I'm talking about having a plan in which some part or all of the property could be in a managed natural landscape. So coming into the HOA, the questions are, what kind of safeguards can be in the HOA or not be in the HOA to allow changes to the homes, whether they want to put an accessory dwelling unit or a workshop or whatever, and what they can do on their property. So that's the one sort of big question. And then the other question is, I think I understood that if the PUD were either refused by council or by referendum or by whatever, and it would be a straight RA subdivision, I think I understood that there would still be an HOA. So I'm interested in why there would need to be an HOA, and then if it would be similar to the one with a PUD. And so that's sort of a big question, Greg, I guess.
That's a good question.
You can respond to that.
I can respond to it. I took some notes. You saw me writing down. So need for an HOA. First of all, we believe a homeowners association would be required whether it was a straight zone, single family development, or a planned unit development PUD. All our neighborhoods currently have HOAs in them. HOAs have two purposes. One purpose really has very little to do with what we just discussed, but maintaining the stormwater ponds and the common open space areas is a primary purpose of the HOA. And we will have to have an HOA to maintain the constructed wetland, the entryway, and a couple of little open space areas, which we've shown on the plan. The second, which more centers around some of your concerns, are the development restrictions, design restrictions that often come with an HOA. And, historically ours are quite strict, to be honest. They are strict because that's what our customers typically desire. They desire to be in communities where they know what's going to happen around them will be similar to what they are doing. They want to be in communities where if they mow and take care of their lawns in a certain way and form, that their neighbors will also mow and take care of the lawns in a certain way or form. We understand Yellow Springs is a unique place. And as such, some of the things that Marianne has brought up to our attention are important. Areas like managed landscape can do similar appropriate attractiveness and be better for the environment than what a typical maybe grass might be. So what we've committed to under the Plan Commission approval is to work with staff and perhaps a few people that are appointed by the council to tweak the HOA documents a little bit in order to make sure that the things that the village wants to ensure are allowed remain to be allowed. Exactly how that's going to fall out, I'm not even sure at my own point this time yet, to be honest. But happy to work with the village as we have to date and see what type of result we can get. And I should point out, that'll be something that's conditioned of the PUD. If we go through straight zoning, we're going to go ahead and do the HOA that we feel is the best appropriate, and would prefer to continue down the path we've continued to this point in time where we've created a development that is a shared effort, and as such, perhaps the HOA document should be too. And so we're happy to work with the village staff, like I said, and try to hammer those out to allow some of those things. Most notably, on some of the specific questions that Marianne brought up, I should point out that most of this is currently farm field. So under our proposal, we will be adding street trees, which are not currently available, are currently there. We will be adding the bio wetland area. We will be preserving a number of the existing trees up along the left buffer, or west buffer, sorry, depending which way you're facing. We do and are happy to include a requirement in the HOA docs that require native landscaping. I think that's something that often gets missed. There are times where developers and honestly homeowners can occasionally plant non-native species, and doing so causes problems. So we want to make sure that we are using and planting native species in our development, and we'll work with council on that effort. And Marianne, did I miss anything?
You didn't talk about accessory dwellings, like if someone, let's say someone wants to have a home office not attached to their house, or they want to have a work shed or something like that.
That's a good question. So accessory dwellings are something that's usually controlled by zoning more than our HOA docs. I could see them as being appropriate on the single family lots. I think the duplex lots and the townhome lots would be a little more challenged for that. But again, something we'd work with the village a little bit on as needed, I think. I've talked to Johnny quite a bit about it. My primary concern on the single family lot was simply utilities. Typically, we provide one sanitary lateral and one water lateral to each lot. And as such, you know, each case I expect would have to be reviewed by Johnny or somebody in the village to make sure that that lateral could handle the accessory unit. And again, those I think would be best addressed on a case-by-case basis, probably by village staff as time goes on. Accessory units don't typically show up the same day as a single-family house does. A lot of times there are things that happen years later. So if I hear Marianne's concern, she wants to make sure we're not boxing in the village on something they can't do later on. And we're happy to work with them on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think George has his hand up.
I do, thank you. Just to build on what Greg had articulated, I think, quite frankly, well, accessory structures are going to be more governed by the zoning regulations and not by our HOA. And it would be more difficult to add accessory structures, in my opinion, under the current underlying zoning. But the other thing I wanted to mention was about the management of the homeowners association. Typically, we start these homeowner associations with 3 board members or trustees that are typically appointed by us, the developer. Once the development is substantially completed or completed, we turn the management or the trustee positions, if you will, over to the homeowners within the development or community. So they will elect their own officers, and they will also have the ability to govern themselves going forward. So for the first maybe 5 years, you'll see the HOA managed, by our professional management team. We do have a property management division within the company that manages multiple apartments and condominiums and homeowner associations. And so we have a pretty good system in place to do that. But I also did want to assure council members and Lisa, for your question, that eventually that management is turned over to the homeowners.
All right, thanks a lot, George. Other questions?
Is
Mary
Lisa-
Ann, do you have anything else?
Oh, okay. I was waiting for you, Lisa. Well, I have one, I'll just have one, it's one question. What if someone wants to take one of your models? I'm thinking of single family homes, and they want the house to be smaller. Let's say they don't want one of the rooms or something. In other words, they basically want a smaller house. Is that possible?
I'll get that, Greg. This is George again. We do make custom changes to our houses, and most of them come with either 2 bedrooms and a den or a study, or 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, or even options for additional bedrooms. We don't often get a request to remove a room, but that's something that we would certainly look at on a case-by-case basis, because all of our designs are custom and initially, and they're all on our CAD system here in the office. So, certainly we would work with any buyer to look at customizing a plan to his or her needs. Sometimes we more often see that in the case where we have, say, a 4-bedroom home and somebody wants the other 3 bedrooms to be larger, or they want to create sitting areas or something like that, that are within some of those spaces. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, this is Lisa. I'll step in now. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the presentation and the information that you've provided. I do have a couple of questions. I think you've probably seen all of these from conversations that you've had with other council members. As everyone knows, I wasn't one of the primary council members that was involved with the development. So maybe asking questions as part of my catching up. First of all, I would echo Mary Ann's question about having a homeowners association. I really just don't think that is consistent with Yellow Springs. And I just still don't get that. And I know of places that have had them, but I just am not getting that. I know you've answered it, so I won't ask you to answer again, but I don't get it. I really was, glad that you reinforced the street lights and the sidewalks. I think that's really important. To Brian's earlier point, I'm asking questions not just for myself, but based on communications that I've had from community members that have been extensive, and there's some consistent themes. My biggest ask, maybe it is, this isn't an easy one, and maybe this can't be addressed today. But I really am compelled by the studies that have been done in the past that Brian alluded to about the need for different building types, different kinds of places for people to live in Yellow Springs. So I'm really glad to hear about the duplexes. The townhomes perhaps are good for families that don't ever anticipate having mobility challenges because of the stairs. But what I think we need in Yellow Springs more than anything is apartments. And I appreciate that the village will have the opportunity to do something with a donated piece of land. Although I understand that that's not going to be the easiest maybe spot to build on. But I would expect those would be low income, apartments or a pocket community or something like that. But in my wish list, rather than all the single family homes that are included in the current design, there would be an apartment building, a rental apartment building. Now, I believe that's what we need the absolute most in Yellow Springs. And I do believe that it would be incredibly popular. I don't mean a huge apartment building, but a small apartment building. And I don't mean an affordable, you know what I mean, low income apartment building. I mean, a nice market level apartment. We just don't have enough of those here. Now, I did hear you say that you do some property management. That was interesting, but I would say that I'm thinking about this under the thinking that Oberer would not be the property manager of this, but that in fact it would be built on spec for sale. And I would be stunned if there wasn't steep competition for buyers for an apartment building in this area. So I don't know whether you can respond to this right now, or if that's something to bring up, but I believe more than anything else, that would be the best use for a portion of this land. So let me pause there.
Thank you. I appreciate the apartment comment. We've heard that before, so I am prepared to respond a little bit to it. There's certainly no part of this land that maybe wouldn't be appropriate for a small apartment building, but apartment development has taken on a very unique trajectory the past 10, 20 years. You may have noticed every new apartment building is identified as luxury apartments. Well, the large reason for that is that's all us developers can make work. So what has happened with apartments, especially market rate apartments, and if you don't look for tax credits, a different scenario. But if you're looking for market rate apartments, they tend to have to be in 150 unit plus size developments and tend to have rents that are somewhere around $1,200 for a 1-bedroom unit, which we agree is kind of ridiculous, but it's near impossible to make the financial numbers work on these apartments. Not. That's why Oberer doesn't build a whole lot of them anymore, even though historically we did, and even though we manage a whole lot of them. We tend to take on a little bit of other people's developments who've chosen to invest in this way or form. We just largely don't see 150 unit development as appropriate for this place or Yellow Springs. But we're happy to work with the village. If there's a different location we can find, if we can offer expertise to the village and do some, I don't know, if Lisa's idea of a lease purchase might take some hashing out, but it's not terrible. So, if there's a village investor who would like to manage a smaller, complex somewhere in the village, it doesn't have to be 150 units. Yeah, I mean, I'm likely to make those discussions and have that discussion. I don't really know that I believe this is exactly the right site for it, though. Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I had in my mind, 12 units.
Yeah, I agree. 12 units would be a whole lot easier to do with the local guy. I haven't done 12 unit development ever, but certainly something we can look into, see if there's a local guy who wants to participate in one with us. And there's no limitation, by the way, from the townhomes, the duplexes, or the single family houses from becoming rentals. Certainly somebody could buy one of those, an investor could buy 4 of the townhomes and turn it into a rental product. We don't prohibit or limit rental uses in our HOA documents, and certainly the existing product could be, especially by a small investor, used for rental. We can also see instances where the duplexes, in particularly, where a person could live in one side and rent out the other, or maybe put in a mother-in-law or other family friend or person in the other side of the duplex. So certainly that type of a product would enable itself to a rental use.
Could I jump in for a minute?
Okay, go ahead,
I'm
Marianne.
sorry. Well, I wanted to respond to both of the things you said, Lisa. First, the HOA, the Thistle Creek and Park Meadows, and I think Littlewood all have HOAs. So for Thistle Creek, for example, the HOA only deals with the common area, the retention area. Thistle Creek, the HOA is much more involved in, doing the repairs on the homes itself. And Littlewood, I think the HOA is only for the common area, but we do have them in Yellow Springs, and they can either be very restrictive or not. Also, I really appreciate you bringing up the rentals. I think what Greg is saying is that for whatever reason now, cost of building, I think that having the return on investment for rentals is just so difficult. I think we need to do it. It probably will, and I appreciate Ober's willingness to potentially help us think about it, or as Greg said, even build the townhouses and find local investing groups or regional investing group that would help do that. So I'll sign off. Thanks.
Okay, gee, I lost my chain of thought. I had a follow-on question, but maybe it'll come back to me. Okay, so I did have another question. I've heard from a number of community members, and maybe this is a Denise question. It had to do with the way the current lots that are within the whole space are currently zoned, and that not all are currently zoned RA. So
That's correct.
in my head, I'm imagining that that's part of the PUD development, but I just want to clarify in case my head isn't quite clear on that.
Well, currently there's one parcel that is zoned RC, high density. There's one parcel that's already zoned PUD, but it doesn't have any underlying zoning. I found a document from the 1980s, some minutes where there was one line where it was possibly going to be explored for commercial use. And everything else is RA. When we brought the 30 acres in from the annexation, it comes in as RA. It was actually previously zoned for Miami Township. I think it's like R1A, which was their highest density, which was 10,000 square foot lots. So now it's currently zoned RA, which is 7,500 square foot lots.
Thanks, that's helpful. But I was going to ask in follow up to the conversation about there being possible rental opportunities within the existing proposed use. And this is a question that I'll echo from another council person, Carmen Brown, who's not present at this meeting today. So just to clarify that when people buy into a duplex, they are just buying unit within the duplex. So there'd be two different buyers for each duplex, not a one person buys the whole thing and then figures out what to do with it. Not that one person couldn't buy both, but that if they're sold separately. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's how I understand it.
I'll get that question, Greg. This is George. It's our intention to design the duplexes and the duplex lots so that a half of a duplex building can be sold to one individual owner and the other half can be sold to a different owner. However, there would not be anything that would prohibit one owner from buying both halves.
That's what I thought. Thank you so much. I know that came up from one of the council members. I have one other comment. I appreciate that you addressed the barriers, I guess is a very legitimate word, to a connection with 68. And I do understand that neither Oberer nor the village owns the land that sits between the current planned development and 68. And I also take note of your comments that in your way of thinking, that would ultimately only increase traffic concerns. However, I would say when I keep tally of what I'm hearing from community members, I would say the number one most frequent concern and most frequent ask is to have a connection to 68. So right now, it's not possible because of limitations of ownership, but I wonder if it could be considered or if it would be desirable to stub in somehow a road to nowhere that in the future, easement or ownership changes, that a connection to 68 could be made. I believe the community wants that.
Greg, I'll answer that again. This is George. Well, number one, I think we kind of talked about our concerns and hesitation to make that connection because of our concerns over the effect it will have on the new development in the way of through traffic that wouldn't otherwise be through traffic. The other issue, though, is it would require, that we know where, even if we were going to do it, it would be hard to determine today exactly where that connection would be and where you would put the stub street. And then lastly, it would also take a permit to cross the creek, which right now we don't have to do, and we don't have to interrupt or disturb the creek, and we prefer to keep it that way. So, and I guess I should also mention that, that wouldn't typically be a requirement under the current zoning or a proposed zoning, given the fact that we don't have any control of or hope to have control of, property that would get us out to that connection. Not to mention the fact it would likely be a very expensive connection, not just across the creek, a small bridge. And my guess would be that ODOT would likely require, because of the interruption of traffic onto 68 directly from the development, there would likely be some kind of an acceleration, de-acceleration lane that would add a lot of unnecessary and unwanted costs.
Okay, thank you very much. That for now are questions and comments that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Brianne, I saw you mic on earlier. Were you going to add something about zoning? Or
with respect to the parcels as they're currently zoned, Denise covered it, but that parcel that is currently already zoned a PUD, I found ordinance number 1979-30, and it specifically does not have an underlying zoning. There's been this characterization that it was supposed to be a commercial PUD, but 1979-30 says it is not. It is just PUD, and that's when it was rezoned as a PUD. It was in 1979.
Okay.
And it specifically says it could be residential or commercial.
Gotcha. Okay. Are there any other concerns that or things we can share related to rezoning? Because I've seen some different things pop up about that. Okay, well, Brianne, if there are, you can let us know about that later. Marianne, did you have any other questions?
I have a question and a comment. My comment is about the traffic flow. It's my sense from what I've read of people's concern that the traffic flow concern is about Spillane. Solely about, well, primarily about Spillane. I actually rode my bike out, walked the property yesterday and rode up and down on Spillane, looking at how Spillane might be changed to encourage, make sure that traffic was slow. And I also think that the concern is not about how long it takes a car to get somewhere. It's my sense the concern is about pedestrians and cyclists. As I've looked at the design of this development and look through, if I lived in a particular house, where I would go, I'm convinced that most of the traffic, as Ober has said, will not come out onto Spillane. If you look at that design, there are, of course, the houses that face on Spillane, which probably would go up Spillane, and I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 houses. And then you go into the road that would go in. Those first houses might take Spillane as opposed to going up within the development. But the majority of the houses, at least 3/4, would go up within the development. There'd be no reason that they would go in and out around the development and go up Spillane, unless they were going to go south, and then they take Spillane to the right and go to Hyde. So I am concerned about safety on Spillane, regardless of the development. And I think that as a village, we have to make sure that it's a safe, complete street. So the question I have gets back to environmental issues. I'm assuming there's going to be a gas connection for natural gas. What I'd like to know is, would it be possible if someone wanted to do, for example, geothermal, have electric heat rather than gas, have those the split things? What kind of accommodations could be made for people who might have that interest in not using natural gas as a heating source?
I'll answer that, Greg. This is George again. So up until current time, and I remember developing back in the 70s when there was actually a moratorium on extending natural gas into residential developments. And so a lot of developments, well, even back dating into the 60s and 70s, were total electric, and gas did not get extended. More current developments over the last, 30 years, like to have gas available to the property, because sometimes they prefer gas cooking, sometimes gas water heaters, sometimes gas fireplaces even. So gas is a desirable utility to have to the property. Now, we don't require that a customer heat or cool their house with natural gas, electric, solar, or anything else, but we like to work with the customer to make sure that they have all the options that we can available to them. Geothermal is, we've seen geothermal used a lot, and have built houses where customers have opted for that option. However, typically geothermal is more often used where there's larger lots, and you don't have, this is more of an urban infill type of a design. Lots are smaller and there's not a lot of room to put geothermal in. However, if a system can be designed, particularly when the geothermal exterior lines perhaps are in the rear yard, certainly would not be anything to preclude that from happening. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I want to just kind of add to, I think Marianne raises an excellent point around if there are concerns already about safety along Spillane, then I think that is something that as we continue to improve our walkability, bikeability via our active transportation plan and otherwise, we need to look at that. And in fact, I think some conversations have gone on around that. I know Josue and I have talked about it. It also brings to mind, Lori Asklund had shared with council several months ago about treatments like bike boulevards. And, it makes me wonder just in general, how we kind of look at all areas of the village and, think about how we mitigate any potential impacts. But I do want to emphasize that beyond the traffic study, which I do want to highlight was extended out to Hyde Road and came back with the same results about it not having an impact. I think the only thing I heard is a 1 second additional wait time at Hyde. But it looks like one day we're going to get a traffic circle. So, you know, then we'll be all set. But the other thing I want to highlight is in talking about sort of the rollout of this development and, you know, the idea that you never know. And so I think while all the studies and what we see in other parts of the village and whatnot support that we're fine, we're ultimately looking at probably around 25 houses a year, maybe a little bit less. And to that point of those going online, we need to constantly evaluate what's going on and respond to that in whatever way makes sense. And I think that includes things like, as we see more environmentally sustainable treatments, wildlife habitats, and so forth. I mean, this is an ongoing aspect of the work for our entire community to maintain our sustainability and our vibrancy. Lisa, I saw you mic'd back on. Did you have something else? Okay, I have a few more questions, and I think we are going to have to wrap it up. And I see Max's hand, and I know we've gotten a lot of different questions, but I do want to highlight again that a key reason that we put together the town hall on Wednesday, starting at 7 p.m., is because we want to answer all the questions we're receiving. I know we're already creating a question and answer document that's going to be available via our website, and we'll promote that on social media. There's a great letter report that Oberer has put together that was the basis of the slides that we looked at, so we want to make that available. So there's a variety of resources that we will keep on building on as we have 3 more meetings to continue to discuss citizen concerns and questions. But I do want to clarify a few things. So first of all, I just want to specifically talk about that when we look at some of the values of the contributions that Oberer is suggesting with the PUD, that does not encompass a variety of other things, such as bringing infrastructure to the affordability or the affordable carve out, and a variety of other things. And I know that Josue will speak more to like kind of the actual value when we really look at the things that it's providing to the community. I wanted to get a little bit more detail about the marketing study. And one of the things that's been brought up by a variety of folks is sort of a shifting, whether it's downsizing or, you know, just kind of, you know, movements between different community members that will open up housing in other areas for families and whatnot. And I wonder, Greg or George, if you could just briefly speak to have the marketing studies and your sort of perspective on this supported that?
Sure. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, Brian, our market studies focus on people in what they call market delineation area. And each market delineation area is different based on the size of the community and the transportation efforts to it. But largely, they tend to focus on a couple mile area around where a neighborhood could be built. And it takes demographics and other information from that surrounding area, from that market delineation area, and uses those demographics along with other home sales that have occurred, home values, age of the population, education attainment of the population, a number of other things to arrive at a conclusion, for lack of a better description, recommendation. And, you know, when we started out, it was no secret. We started out looking primarily at single family. And we found ample market for a single family development of about 140 units. But as working through with the village staff and council members, you know, I think the more diverse plan is even better in addressing a more diverse market. So it enables us, it benefits us in that it enables us to sell to a larger groups of different people. Some of the rumors that may have previously occurred is that we are making more profit off of the PUD than we would under straight zoning. I do want to emphasize we don't believe that's true. In fact, we did some counting, some logic. We could probably make a little bit more money on a single family development. But again, we'd serve a narrower band of individuals. And especially for a town the size of Yellow Springs, we think a wider band of individuals makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, thanks for that, George. And it does kind of remind me, I don't know that we fleshed it out, but it's in the letter that 143 units could be built in that plan on existing zoning. The PUD is 140 units, and that kind of gets back to that density bonus. Greg or George, I think this is also a good time to speak briefly about how the units are sold and how our local realtors play into that.
I'll take that, Greg. Couple of points, Brian, that I should add on to what your comments were. Not only does the PUD allow us to deliver more diversified product in the form of the duplexes, the townhouses, and even the affordable product, but it also broadens the price range. You know, it would be our goal to try to get at least between the townhouses and probably more likely the smaller duplex units, you know, we'd like to get something in the middle $200,000 range to start with. But that would be, well, I'm just going to say it would be impossible if they were all single family homes, and your average sale price would be much higher. Your absorption might be a little slower, but the overall sales revenues would be greater, frankly, under the current zoning with an all single family product. So I just wanted to make that comment. To address your second question, we have our own on-site salespeople that are trained to sell our products. And that's kind of an involved process because, as Greg mentioned, we're a semi-custom home builder. So not only does that sales staff have to know how to generate a real estate contract so somebody can purchase a home, they also have to walk them through that process to help them get through the selection process, because we offer a ton of colors and cabinets and flooring and light fixtures and plumbing fixtures and all that stuff, and not to mention the custom changes that we've commented about a couple of times. And so what we find ourselves doing is working with the real estate community. Wherever we go, wherever we build, we market ourselves heavily to the local real estate community, trying to educate them and inform them as to what products that we can offer in the community, and invite them to bring their customers, their clients into our development, and we pay them a commission just like any seller would pay a commission to a realtor that helps sell an existing property. So the other thing that does is, we think, because a large part of our buying audience will come from the surrounding community in Yellow Springs and the township, you know, obviously those people are going to have homes to sell in many cases, and in many cases, you know, we want to see the local real estate community get the sales activity off of selling the existing homes, you know, for those new home clients. So, but, and I guess I should tell you that we've actually always looked at the existing community as our biggest competition, or the existing houses in the community as our biggest competition, not a new home community. And so that's the reason for 20 plus years we've been marketing that way. And I will tell you that in a typical year, our average number of sales, or our average sales volume, is anywhere from about 37% to 43% of the homes that we do sell is with the assistance and cooperation of the existing real estate, or the surrounding real estate community.
All right, thank you, George. And you know, I want to kind of add to that I think this provides an opportunity around some of the affirmative marketing efforts that have been led by the 365 Project and other groups, and integrating that into you know, having that sort of diversity that is such an important part of our community. So that is great. I am going to transition this to Josue to talk about the town hall, and maybe just again reemphasize a few things I mentioned about next steps. But I do want to segue with a final question from me, which is the village incurring any development or ongoing infrastructure costs related to the proposed project?
Is that for me, Brian? The short answer is no. We're not taking on any infrastructure or cost. All the infrastructure that is needed for the site is being done by the developer, Oberer. They're going a bit further on the cost. We touch based on the stormwater situation that the village has a responsibility for, and the developer Oberer has agreed to take that on our behalf. So I think that they're making improvements that would otherwise be ours to do.
All right, thanks, Josue. So yeah, you want to talk about? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to transition into the town hall. All right, the town hall is scheduled for this Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And what we are looking to accomplish through the town hall is to have a more open dialogue. One of the challenges of a work session, it is the focus is to ensure that council has the space and the information they need to inform their decision at an upcoming hearing. We want to set aside an amount of time and a space specifically to answer questions from citizens. We have started compiling a list of questions, so thank you to all those that submitted their questions. If you're interested in submitting a question, please send it to us. You can send it to Judy, myself, or Erica Thomas, and we're compiling all those questions into a SharePoint document that we're sharing here with council members, with the development team, all the individuals involved in this development on the administration side. And together we'll look to respond to those questions. Many of those questions are within the scope of what we will respond to. There's some that may not be, primarily because they may be outside of what we're working on. But we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. If we are not able to get to your questions during the town hall, we will write up responses to ensure those questions are answered, and that council has those questions and answers to those questions. I think a lot of citizens are reaching out to whoever they can get a hold of, and a lot of them are going to council, and so we want to make sure that council has that information as well. So that's the plan for Wednesday. I will be there. Denise, Johnny from our team will be there, and so will the Oberer team.
Oh, that's great to hear that George and Greg can be there. Josue, can you talk a little bit more about just sort of how people can access or will be able to get access to some of the resources that I highlighted?
Yes, there are a couple of ways that you have access to them. Every document that goes to council is typically uploaded on the clerk base. And the clerk base has a list of agenda and has clickable items. If there's a document referenced in for example, in this work session, there was a traffic study reference, that's a clickable link that will take you to that file. So clerk base is a source for information. For this project, we're creating a space on SharePoint to upload the documents relevant to the project. So we'll make that link available. The public will be able to link through that SharePoint site and look at the documents. There's a third location of documents, and that is Sustainable Yellow Springs. The Sustainable Yellow Springs website is where our comprehensive land use plan resides, and all the documents and studies that fed into the comprehensive land use plan. If you recall, Brian and council members, one of the things that we wanted to do with this new iteration of the comprehensive land use plan is that we wanted to make it a living document, something that will be readily available, could be modified through time. And it was important to put that on the website versus how we've typically done things that we get a fancy report that gets printed on hardstock paper and it sits on a shelf. The comprehensive land use plan lives on our website. It's sustainableyellowsprings.com. So the public has access to the comprehensive land use plan, the Bowen housing needs assessment, the after transportation plan. All those documents are listed on that site. In our next posts, we'll try to get this ahead of the town hall, but if not, at the conclusion of the town hall, we'll itemize where all those resources live and how folks can access those resources.
Great. And then I think I just heard you say that we'll also promote that on our Facebook page.
Yes, yes.
Great, great, great. The other thing that I wanted to just make sure everyone was clear on is, regardless if you send a question to Judy or to Josue or to a council member, or you write a letter, we're going to continue to collect those questions. And I think I will also just continue to encourage folks. I believe all council members are receiving a lot of emails and other outreach, and everyone wants to be very responsive. I want to thank George and Greg for the work that they've done and the extended amount of information that was kind of in that first iteration of requests, and we're continuing to take that in. So any quick final comments, because I do want to wrap us up on time. Anything else from, George, go ahead.
Brian, I forgot to address one thing that has come up in a couple of the other public meetings, and that is a couple of the residents, as I recall, had mentioned cluster development and that they'd like to see more cluster development, and thought maybe cluster type development applications, might be addressed here. And I just wanted to mention to you that one of the benefits in cluster development for both the village and a developer would be to minimize the amount of infrastructure and or minimize the amount of property that's disturbed in order to achieve, a desired density. But in this case, I wanted to mention that, we're really dealing with only 52 acres, which is pretty much too small for a cluster development. And the other reason is there's really no opportunity to save much infrastructure because of the sewer line that comes through the property, because of the stub streets to the north and to the south and to the east. And so because you already have to make those connections anyway, you're already putting in that street and infrastructure. So it kind of diminishes that opportunity. But I had that in my notes from the previous discussion. So I realize it didn't come up today, but I, for anybody that was listening, I wanted to at least offer that explanation.
All right, appreciate that, George. And again, I'll just say, the town hall is all about focusing on citizens' questions and comments. And we will be providing ample time in our council meetings as well for anything new as we continue this discussion. So with that, I think we—
Brian, this is Lisa. We just have 2 minutes left, and I think the Oberer team is not going to be at the town hall.
They are.
Since we just— since we just have one person, Max Chrome, with a comment, could we invite him to speak even if we go over by 1 or 2 minutes?
I would recommend against that. When we're doing it for one, we should open it to everyone.
I agree, Lisa. If we are going to open it, we had said, several times that, we probably wouldn't have time, but I imagine actually probably a lot of people have questions and comments. So I tend to agree with Brianne. But I do appreciate that we want to hear fully from our citizens. Okay, so I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
I move we adjourn. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. I
Yes.
second then.
Okay, dramatic pause. All those in favor, signify
And
by
this
saying
meeting for the rest of our lives.
yes.
No, I don't really.
Yes, thanks again, everyone. Great information.
Thanks to
session.
everyone.
Yeah, much appreciated. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.